I'd like to talk to you today here in the audience, and we have a studio audience that you people here may not be aware of, out in Webland. This is being telecast out to on webinar to some people out there, and it looks like we've got Lee, Nigel, Robert, Tammy, and some other people out there we're going to be picking on this afternoon. So you folks out there listening to me in the webinar, if you're familiar with using the webinar, you have a little button on your console. You'll be able to raise your hand and ask questions like people here in the studio audience. So we may be getting to you a little bit later and have you raise your hand and ask them some questions. So let's get down to the meat of the situation here, talking about flying in Central Florida's airspace. We're going to talk about flying in Florida's airspace a little bit specifically today because we live here in Florida where 23% of the world's flight training has occurred. For you people sitting here watching out into Never Never Land, this particular seminar can be plugged into Ogden, Utah, Los Angeles, California, New York, or whatever. So I'm not going to bore you with the specifics of how big Class B airspace in Orlando is to bog you down. I'm going to teach you how to be aware of things that may happen in airspace in other parts of the country out there. Now, why do I do this? Is because I have a lot of experience and I want to share that knowledge and experience with people of things I've seen over the years in the safety program, and I've seen personally, friends of ours that have been lost and so forth. Now, what happens when you have an accident? Hopefully you don't get killed, but if you do get killed, you die, and your wife gets a lot of money, your husband gets a lot of money. You have a reputation to uphold, so this is what you never want to see, okay? That's the way it will be. Experienced pilot, instructor, knew better, and you can just read it. When he's taught for 30 years, he knew better to get into that single engine airplane with old instruments and go out here and fly at night across the middle of Tampa and not talk to air traffic control. You know, the whole list goes on. So that's what keeps me safe right there, because that's the reality of you being on the 6 o'clock news, of some reporter talking about what they don't know about, explaining what they think that happened to you in the air, even though you didn't know it, but your relatives or family may not know it have happened, okay? So that's kind of the motto and what I do it. All right, let's talk about airspace here a little bit. Like I said, I'm not going to bore you too much with the specifics of it, but how to kind of look at any sectional chart or IFR chart, or what to think about if you're going to fly in Florida's, Atlanta's, or wherever, anywhere in the world's airspace, because you have the resources available to you, okay? And that's a typical sectional chart that some VFR pilot would look at and go, wow, look at that. Now, if you notice here, you see, this is Orlando here, and then you get the big NASA center out here. We're going to talk about some easy ways to know about that. But, you know, what does all that stuff mean? And we've gone through some things here that are required when you take a flight test. And for example, 61105 aeronautical knowledge, use of aeronautical charts for VFR navigation, pilotage, dead reckoning, navigational systems, because we have what in the cockpits now? Glass cockpits, GPSs, laptops, and everything else. So you had better be able to demonstrate that. And there's some ways to do that without getting fogged up and getting caught into the technicalities of everything, that you can get the examiner or the check pilot to know that you understand the situation, okay? 3 hours of flight training, a single engine airplane, blah, blah, blah. Let's look at the highlights of it. Radio communications and the use of navigational systems, facilities, radar services appropriate to instrument flight. Yes, the VFR guys, in my opinion, should be able to explain a little bit about that, because they're flying an airplane in the airspace system. Even though they may be VFR, they're getting into possibly an IFR situation of navigational parameters. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about that later so you understand it. Yes, here's the old typical thing that we've all learned. That is helpful. You should know that information. I'm not going to sit here and explain that to you, because I don't want you to think that's what we're teaching airspace about today. We're going to really teach you airspace, all right? Not to quote to me 3 miles of visibility and 1 mile of clear clouds and all that stuff. We're going to understand kind of why. I don't want you to think about it out there, okay? Information's on the chart. You can go read it. It will explain it to you. So you can kind of look over and go, you know, the area around the Class D airspace is 4,000 feet of elevation. We've learned that from our instructors and all. Like I say, we're going to get to a different way to do that. But that information is an open book test. When you look at a chart, it is on the corner of the chart. So if the examiner were to ask you something about the height of the Class D airspace over Lakeland, Florida, you can go, oh, okay, I go over here. If it's in a square block, I see it. Sure enough, there it is on the Lakeland airspace. It's 4,000 feet. You win the cigar. Okay, that's easy. Now, where's Class A, D, B, C, and E and G airspace? It's all over the map out there. We can't see Class A airspace, but it's 18,000 and above, up to 60,000 feet. I doubt we're going to be flying up there, but you could be. Class B, it's, the biggies out there is what I call it. Remember, it's a biggie: Orlando, Atlanta, Los Angeles, Tampa, Miami, blah, 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 blah. And it's all on the map. And Lord, you just can't explain to somebody. I could take the rest of this whole entire seminar and then tomorrow and try to explain to you Tampa's Class B airspace. And I could confuse you in that time too. Going to get there and show you how to look at the airspace differently. Okay, we all know about the little blue and magenta circles out there and what denotes some Class C airspaces. Not going to go through it because all of them aren't identical. There are differences in the Class C airspaces out there. A little bit different parameters. I'm not here to teach you that. We're going to get the big picture here in a minute. The Class C. The Class D, the same way. They come in different varieties. There are still a few, I see some gray hairs in here. There are a few Tursas floating around. Everybody remember what a Tursa was? Terminal Radar Service Area, absolutely. There's one set up in Macon, Georgia, still on the map up there to this day. I don't know why it's still there. Wilmington, South Carolina, there's still a few there. Treat it like Class D or C airspace. Just remember it's positive control, not positive control, but controlled airspace, and we should talk to people. Now, you'll find that going through my seminar here, I'm very adamant about talking to air traffic control. Okay? Because if you talk to air traffic control, usually they're going to be your best bet of keeping you out of some areas you should not be in. And if you have an emergency, having air traffic control on the hook, they usually have some emergency equipment headed towards the site where you might possibly be going down. So there's a lot of reasons to talk to them, but specifically, they can help you with the airspace because guess whose airspace it is? It's their airspace. Okay? So I'm kind of adamant on that. Class G, we're getting some areas out there. Now we're going to start talking about what this stuff is, and this magenta and this blue circle thingy that's out there. Now, as you'll notice on the chart here, if you can see my mouse hanging out in here, these areas out in here are above 1,200 feet and above 700 feet. And I'm going to pick on the crowd out here a little bit. And Class G is out here below 1,200, below 700. Well, what's a 700-foot thing for in this magenta circle around the airport out there? We all know, let's just take it from audience, what's that magenta circle indicate around the Kissimmee Airport there? There's an instrument approach. It's protected for some reason. How many instrument approaches? You have no clue. Not a clue whatsoever, right? And it's right there in front of you in that sectional chart because your instructor hasn't told you about IFR yet because you're a VFR pilot. I always take my students and give them some good IFR training in sectional charts, approach plates. I like to get them in some aerobatic maneuvers. I also like to get them in the King Air or the Learjet or citation or whatever and show them what the rest of the world's about. So when they hear citation coming in at 125 knots on an ILS approach, they kind of got a clue what it is. And I'll show you my friend here in a minute that doesn't. So it's, as usual, let's take a test. And if you guys out there on the webinar want to take a test with us, what is the visibility and cloud requirements in Class D airspace? B? C? Everybody says C there? Some webinar folks out here looks like they're possibly saying C as well. Guess what? You guys win the cigar. It is 3 miles, 500 feet below and 1,000 feet above, 2,000 feet horizontally. We can remember that because we're taught to recite that, okay? Question number 2 for you guys out there. See if we get it up on the website out here. What is the airspace floor inside and outside the magenta ring circling or surrounding the airport? Everybody likes A. Looks like some of the folks on the webinar here are saying they liked A as an answer also. Bingo. We're doing good today. You get your wings credit already. You can leave. I'm sorry. No, you have to stick around and listen to me. Now, why is the airspace floor inside and outside that magenta surrounding an airport 700 feet and 1,200 feet? He's got it. The guy says A. Good deal. You get double wings credits and a brand new Cessna 172. No, seriously, we have a tendency to remember. Why is that? I mean, we learned that. It's because we IFR guys want some protection going into that airport. We don't want the VFR guys flying up into an area we could be descending down through. So, if you look at any horizontal approach path, you'll see that we cross through that 1,200 and 700 foot range going into that airport. That's where the busy happens there, okay? So that's where we want some protection of area there. It's just that simple. You know, you've seen it, 700, 1,200 feet. Why? That's because we want some protection. You want some protection too, because the IFR guys aren't supposed to descend down into your area. You can be legal and they can be legal, and we're going to talk about the IFR and the VFR fight here in a little bit on some approaches. So let's take our little Lakeland Airport here, and I'll kind of circle it for those of you who might not be in the area. There's Lakeland Airport where we are here at sunny Florida, a sunny fun for you guys on the webinar. If you look at the tip of my mouse, that's where all of us are located in this little building right here, okay? There's the magenta circle and the blue circle around it. So we teach, just curious, how many instructors do we have in the room here? Okay, good. We need to be teaching our students why that's out there, not just because it's out there and there's an approach out there. So wouldn't it be kind of cool if we could just overlay an IFR chart on top of that? And you can do that. You can print that off the internet and lay it right down beside them that says, well, my goodness, we have an ILS approach, the runway 23, right into this airport here. Runway 5, okay? Now, we said before 17,000 certificates were issued in Florida last year. Private, instrument, commercial, blah, 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 blah. You take 17,000 certificates, how many approaches did it take to those guys to get those certificates? You do the math. It's impossible to figure. So in this area, especially close to Orlando in the flight schools, somebody somewhere is shooting some approach just about 24 hours a day, okay? So beware of that. So that could be Mr. Learjet taking a check ride, and he's in a holding pattern. If you look over here, his holding pattern will be at 1,700 feet. Well, right under that is a cutout for this little airport that is not in that airspace. So somebody launches out of there and said, well, let's hang over the airport. There's nothing going on. Let's practice some stalls about 2,000 feet. You can apply that to any airport that you want to. I don't care where it is, Covington, Georgia, Ludowici, Alabama, Irwin, Texas. You've got that situation going on. So before you start bopping out there around these airports, you might want to look with your student who might be doing what where. Okay? Now let's compound the problem a little bit. It has a VOR approach from that direction, for runway 9. Same thing. You might figure, well, I'll come out here and, scoot in and won't worry about, you got a guy descending right here, practicing approach just as legal as he can be, right in here, and you may be in the pattern, not where he could be shooting that approach. But he could be opposite of you shooting in the pattern, and shooting that approach and breaking it off. He may not be able to land, or may not going to be land. He's going to miss the approach. We're going to talk about that in a minute, okay? Look how many approaches there are around this airport. So, okay, I'll go out here to the northeast, way outside this area out here, and I'll practice doing ground reference maneuvers or whatever I'm going to do, slow flight at 2,000 feet. Guess what? A guy here in a Cirrus has plugged in a GPS approach, and he's gone out here, and he's holding it 2,000 feet. So you may not be as safe as you think you are in the G airspace, because it doesn't mean the IFR guys are somewhere else. They may be out there with you, perfectly legal, and both of you can occupy that airspace at the same time, especially in an environment like Lakeland, Orlando, or this whole central Florida region. But it can happen in any metro area. Atlanta has, big time traffic, okay? So it's what I'm saying is be aware. Just take this and go home to your home base and look at that little airport you've been flying out of and see if maybe the airport next door has one. Now let's go think. Let's speak situational awareness and think out there a little bit more. The missed approach for Lakeland Airport is climb, maintain 1,000, left turn 2,000 via this intersection. We don't care. We're not going to name it, but it just happens to be right out here. Right out here. And if you're familiar with this area, Zephyr Hills Airport is probably not one, if the number 2, busiest skydiving airport in the world. You're oblivious to that because you're a student pilot gone out to practice your instrument approaches, and you look at that approach plate, you hadn't looked at Zephyr Hills, you don't even care it's there, and there you are circling over the busiest skydive airport in the world. Also, this airport has its own GPS approach, and I mentioned that's farmland out there, that's swampland, right? So I'm going to practice over the swampland. Who could be out over the swampland? A C-130 from Dobbins Air Force Base shooting GPS approaches into this airport. That's who could be out there. A 100,000-pound C-130 could be right out there playing with you, just as legal as anybody. He's talking to air traffic control. Maybe you're not. because you're practicing ground reference maneuvers. You're outside the Class B in any airspace out there. So I'm just saying, visualize, take these IFR charts and kind of lay them over your VFR charts occasionally and take a look at the big picture out there. Okay? Now let's go back to this other, we got an NDB4 approach into there. Its holding pattern, yes, I'd stay up late at night and figure this stuff out, is right at the same place that the one for Lakeland is, in opposite turns, which is belly to belly. So your belly to belly is somebody you're never going to see them. Bang, things that go bump in the night. Okay, it makes you, it kind of wakens you up. What should you do? Talk to air traffic control. That would eliminate that. I'm going missed approach. I'm out here. He says, well, be aware you have a bearing out there in the same holding pattern. He's probably going to do something about it. And, you know, some of the stuff you can go do on your own. Like I say, any airport, apply it. If you were just talking to air traffic control and had them in the picture, they could probably help you with that. And we have seen those accidents happen like that. And a lot of it, I think, is effectively is not speaking with air traffic control and getting a part of the big picture. Okay? Now, let's go over the big side of what we call the big side of town over here on where NASA is located over here. Okay, and there's Orlando. You know, and I can safely navigate through there. I don't have to talk to air traffic control. You may be right. You may be outside of the airspace and it not necessary to do it. But if you look at how many approaches could be conducted at one time, you're going to fly through somebody's approach path and possible holding pattern. Remember, these guys are over there practicing. So it's not like maybe, I don't know, maybe Birmingham where you don't have that many people practice, not that many flight schools, but in this area over there, I can guarantee you, Embry-Riddle and those guys have something going on all the time, and they're making them shoot. You know, for example, they'll shoot a GPS approach because nobody else is probably going to shoot it just because they got a Garmin 1000, they can do it. So it's a challenge to them. Every right to be out there, but just think about that. And if you instructors broaden that out to your students, that blue and magenta circle means something, and it may not just be because it has a little cutout area like this airport over to the left here, because there are other approaches out in that area that can be conducted simultaneously while you're shooting touch and goes or doing ground reference maneuvers or whatever out here in the blue and thinking you're safe. So that's where we're taking this picture of airspace. Not 3 miles visibility, not military operation areas. Let's look at the big picture and see what's going on out there all around with it, okay? Now, we're going to talk about my side of town a little bit. I live right over in this little area right in here. I'm under the approach path. I love it. Most people are it's noisy at night. I love to sit there and lay in my pool and watch them. Every time they're shooting RNAV approaches and just the same identical place every time. It's cool. But it has its problems too, okay? And I don't have all the approaches on there, but you know, you just can't sneak over and go through the corridor and not talk to ATC safely. You could, but remember, you may be out of their airspace, but you may be in the path of somebody else's descent profile on an NDB approach or a VOR approach or wherever the case may be. So when you look at that sectional chart, just assume it's got a half a dozen approaches with it, and depending on what you're doing, you might want to kind of surveil the area a little bit. Okay? Now, let's go back to our approaches, and we talked about the little VFR, IFR thing going on out there. And the reason I say bring your VFR students in and bring your IFR students in to remind them there are VFR students out there. So you get this guy, he's out there, and he's got this deep airline. He's got this sully voice. Dakota 2167, kilo inbound procedure, turn NDB4 approach, Zephyr Hills, right? I did everything that I was supposed to do. The air traffic controller went back twice as fast. We cleared the NDB4 approach, procedure, turn inbound, contact tower 195 mark, blah, 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 right? There he is. That's my buddy. Huh? He has no idea what that guy just said. Not a clue. He may not even have his license. He just may be one of the good old boys out there that just has flown and hadn't been caught yet, okay? But he's out there, he's clueless. So maybe as that IFR student in our Learjet, maybe we should think about saying, I am 5 miles southwest of Zephyr Hills at 2,000 feet. The guy should at least know that much, okay? I am shooting an NDB4 approach, runway 4, straight in Zephyr Hills, okay? So let's think about that as IFR students. Let's be aware of the VFR guys, or not students, but IFR, anything. Be aware of those little guys out there flying. Because you've heard it before. Why does he shoot a straight in approach? That's the way jets fly. Why is a King Air way out there at 1,500 feet doing 120 knots? That's his final approach speed, and turbine aircraft engine flight 1,500 feet above the ground. So there's some other rules out there that protect us. We don't want to be in the mixture with the small ones. I don't want them to be in the mixture of me if I'm in a 152. They should be separated a little bit. Why did he shoot a straight in? He's practicing an instrument approach. Why do we shoot straight in approaches? You know, the airlines, for 99.9% of the time, they shoot a straight in because it's a stabilized approach. We start out there, we have numbers, we have flap configurations, we have speed configurations, we have power configurations on autopilot. It's safe, and we know where we're going every time, and it's predictable. We don't worry about turning base and getting slow and fast and all that stuff. We do visual approaches occasionally, but most of the time we shoot an ILS always, especially into Atlanta and bigger areas. It keeps us separated from our next door neighbors, 300 feet over, or 2,500 feet over here, shooting an ILS with us. It's visual. We look over and see it. You get this teaching earlier on, you know, you're cleared for the ILS. You're 5 miles from field, turn right, heading 240, join the localized, maintain 5 sounds established. You're cleared for the visual approach. Hello? That's right, you're cleared for the visual approach, because it is a visual approach. Why do they do that? Because if you say, I see the guy in front of me, we tighten it up to about 3 miles. Otherwise, we say we don't see him, they make 5 mile separation. If we say we don't see him in his visual conditions, they go, why don't you go out to the north and inconvenience your passengers for about 30 minutes and we'll let you back in. I got him, he's ahead of me 2 miles. You're cleared for the visual approach number 2 behind the 7-3, okay? So that's how that goes. So that's that little game with air traffic. I don't see him. Yes, you do. You see him out there. So just be aware. Situational awareness is one of it. Okay. Not going to bore you with that, but for the VFR guys in here and the VFR guys at home and IFR guys at home, sometimes at things that look good on a map, like that intersection, just remember that paint may have faded out there. It may have faded. It rains in Florida, and that paint and those blue lines, last time I was up, it had faded a little bit, and it was difficult to see, okay? That yellow has faded too. It's just kind of a dull brown and green right now, this time of year, all right? And it's really green for the pollen. And those numbers have faded too. They're not, I don't see them out there anymore, okay? Just be aware. Though, by the way, those little sticks right there that are 1,000 feet tall, that are silver in the daytime and it's hazy, they're a little difficult to see too. So let's be aware of checkpoints if you're VFR. So, you know, and what these are in our airspace out there. Same thing, understand the VFR. I do a whole class on this. It's just a few slides in this of recognize the VR. We do have a lot of military traffic out here, and they do go screaming down at low altitudes. And Florida you got McDill Air Force Base and NASA and everybody over here. Look at this thing and think about what this stuff is that you learn. After you get your license and you've passed that written test, go out there and look at yourself and go, well, let me look at that VR thing. What is it really about? My instructor talked about that. And just remember, Dennis said that, you know, there may be we haven't flown, the warthogs is what I'm trying to say. The A-10s flying in and out of our airspace, or our house all the time over there. They're down in VFR territory, and they're legal to be there because they're on a VR and IR route. So just think about what this stuff means on the map. Like I say, open book test, the stuff's on the back of the book there. You can look up and learn that stuff, okay? Do not hesitate, if you're a VFR student or an IFR student, to have an IFR chart in your aircraft and use it to plan. We do learn how to do dead reckoning. We do learn how to use the compass. We do learn how to use the ZIZ wheels and so forth, and we've got flight planning charts. This stuff's already got the homework, the distances between it. The airways are already there, the altitudes. It's much safer. If you're an instructor again, once again, take this and teach your student how to read these. They don't necessarily have to use them, but overlay it in their minds. And I got some different ways to overlay it on their computer in a minute. But overlay it in their minds. Don't cheat that student out of that knowledge. You can't open that IFR book. You're a VFR student. Absolutely you can. Give him one of your old charts. Take him for an IFR flight if you can. Let him get to see kind of the other system. Now, we're descending in the airline business. We you know, Florida's got a lot of Indian names and so forth. Everybody know what Indian Territory is, right? Nobody knows what Indian Territory is? Well, out of 18,000, we're going into Indian Territory. That's where the Cherokees, the Navajos, the Seminoles, and all flying. We do. And so going into Indian Territory, let's get our head outside the window, look what's going on. We're going into Indian Territory, no matter where it is, because you're going to find them out there. Okay. Let's talk about GPS a minute. Now, it's our friend, and I hope we're not using that nasty big D button. Everybody know what the D button is, right? Direct, right? Forget that it exists. Go back to your basic pilotage and dead reckoning of, I can fly to this little town over to this railroad track and zigzag over here and go over here because I need to get around that stuff. I think we're getting in the mode of, well, I'll just go direct up to Jacksonville this afternoon. You're going to fly some nasty airspace going through Jacksonville from Tampa, Florida. You may want to weasel around, especially if you don't want to talk to air traffic control, and there's some ways to do that. But don't do the direct button. Once again, familiarize yourself with the airspace and the routes you're going to take, okay? I want to go from Lakeland, Florida, over here to the right, and I eventually want to go to this airport over here. My best, easiest, safest route is to go right across Tampa's International Airport. Why? Because I have the gift of gab. I'll pick the microphone up and go, Tampa approaches Dakota 2167 Kilo. We'd like to go over to Albert Whitley this afternoon, straight over the top of the airport, and then zigzag down and go. He's going to go squawk 0206, fly heading 090, report to airport in sight. We'll give you a vector to it. It's that easy. Otherwise, you might just dip a wing into it. And let me tell you what's happening if you're not aware of this. The air traffic control guys, and I've talked to them a lot, they do try to cut some slack. Sometimes their head may not be turned towards the radar screen when they see you screaming across there. In today's time, somebody in Washington, D.C. or Poughkeepsie, Kansas that works for the other safety organizations is watching you on a laptop. And Tampa Approach has gotten telephone calls from the red phone going, who's got 1,300 feet over the beach? And they go, what guy at 1,300 feet over the beach? Take the filter off. Oh, yeah, there is a guy there. Find out who he is and get back with us. Okay, they call the police department for everything. Okay, so the Hughes 500 helicopter you spot in shrimp for a shrimp boat. He's a Hughes helicopter. Okay, fine, thank you. They're watching from everywhere. So if you think you might skirt Class B airspace and get around a controller, it might not be paying attention to you. You may be right, but you may not get past TSA and somebody else that may be watching. So the airspace is being watched for security reasons, and rightfully so. So just be aware of that. And how do you eliminate that? You talk to air traffic control, because you can always go, he vectored me into it. Okay? So let's go back to being aware of the airspace. I told you I'm going to go direct over top of Tampa, and I'm going down to that airport. This is just not Florida. It applies anywhere out there, okay? Now, if I'm real sharp, yes, he knows all the intersections. I do memorize them. I noticed this afternoon you're departing to the south. You're going to be climbing those jets out of, they're going to be at 6,000. I want to go down and go over Lagoon intersection, which is the final approach fix into the 36 left for Tampa. And I'll cut down that way, and I'll be under your traffic by 2,000 feet. He goes, resume on navigation, which is report to airport in sight. Because he knows that I know my airspace. And you've had that chart in your bag for a long time, and probably flown in your area for a long time. Pull it out and look at some IFR stuff and see. They're out in this area here, and I didn't do it for this one. I do it in an IFR presentation of how many departure procedures and arrival procedures, how the jets do it. And that's sometimes why you get vectored. You may think, why is he doing that? That's a normal path you're going to cross for a line of 7-3s inbound to Tampa, Orlando, Miami, New York, or whatever. So you've got to understand that big picture out there. So understanding airspace is key. Same way, know the airspace. You're departing to the north. You're going to be climbing through 8 when you get out there. I'm going to go up to Bucks intersection and then cut down to that way. Because I know you're busy. I'm listening on the radio. I've heard it. It's push time. It's 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Let them know that you're aware and you're in command of that aircraft and you understand that airspace. You can plug that into your GPS, by the way. If you plug it in direct and try it, you're going to be in this building or Orlando or Tampa's building if you do that. But if you work with these guys, it's just so easy. And once again, knowing the airspace out there. See how easy this is? There's no test on that visibility and cloud height requirements and all. You've already got that behind you. That's not going to get you out of trouble if you dip a wing into Class B airspace or fly into some military airspace or whatever. So understanding your airspace is key. All right, I appreciate everybody coming in and listening to me kind of babble this afternoon. That's my take on airspace. We're going to leave through this area over here. We've got somebody come in directly behind us. I'll be out front to give you some any answers to the questions, give you my email address. Otherwise, I appreciate you and the folks at home sticking with me this afternoon. And please stay enjoy and be safe if you're departing this afternoon. And thanks for attending my seminar and the Sun and Fun festivities.